Welcome to Team Futurism. Today I'm joined by Devin Carson, and we're going to be talking about this Vox article and video that came out last month, and it was titled "Why Everything You Buy is Worse Now." And it was this article and this video. I only skimmed the article, watched the video, and it started out with this woman who bought this bra that she said that she bought the same bra a year ago and it was like, fit great, worked really well, blah, 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 blah. Bought it, a newer version of it. And it fell apart within a couple of months, something like this. And then that led into this discussion of like, why is everything so shitty these days? Where you buy a new thing, you just kind of expect its shelf life to be like definitely not what it used to be. I've gone through this a little bit recently with kind of buying appliances where, it kind of seems like things just don't last that long anymore. But interestingly, Matt Iglesias, who used to be with Vox, one of the founders, he has a podcast that's called Bad Takes, which I do recommend. It's a little annoying, but I do recommend it. He came on to his podcast calling this view a bad take. And he had a lot to say that was like very convincing. And, I'm like a, futurist and I'm into like the idea that things are getting better. And so he did kind of rebut this view a little bit. And I'm kind of like more on his side. I know that you and I, Devin, have talked about this in the past quite a bit, and you're very staunchly on the side of like, yes, everything's getting worse. And so I think that we can have kind of a fun back and forth today about this particular topic, just to lay out the side about like things getting better. Medicine is significantly better than it ever has been before. You can talk about food being, 100 years ago, we thought that we were going to be depleted of food. Now we have an abundance of food. Technology, I mean, the very first iPhone was literal garbage compared to what you have now. It was kind of like a glorified music device that also made phone calls. Now you almost basically don't need any sort of computer because your iPhone does everything, and it kind of does last pretty long, barring like space issues and battery issues. The device itself does last a long time. We could rattle off like tons and tons and tons of examples, but I kind of want to hear your take about why you think that things are getting worse, and I want to hear that view.
Yeah, I want to just start off by saying that Matthew Iglesias sounds like a fucking Skeksis from the Dark Crystal. I could only listen to like a quarter of the podcast you sent me because it's like it like literally has this cadence of like
I know. I actually I've grown to like his voice weirdly because he was on the first time I heard his voice, I think was actually when he was on Joe Rogan, and he starts out like everything he says is like, well, and it's kind of like, that's not the voice of someone who like is necessarily authoritative on any, you know what I mean? But then I tend to like what he says actually.
Man.
He's provocative. Yeah. That's a good example. I do like what he says, and I like his writing for the most part. I don't always agree with him, but his voice is silly.
Oh man, he's got one of those manufactured, like it was like like grown in a petri dish specifically for like NPR and like podcasting and shit, like the cadence and everything.
The cadence, yeah.
But yes, okay, that I got that off my chest. The stuff getting worse. I'll take two examples actually that you just gave. One would be food being better. It is more abundant, but it's lower quality, inarguably. I think anybody that's ever grown their own food kind of has a sense of how nutrient dense food is when it's grown in soil that you take care of, and that has a regenerative. I mean, I guess if you're focused on growing the food, if you're not just like plopping it in the garden and growing it, it's nutrient dense, it's darker, it's more flavorful. It's almost impossible to find food that has that level of quality anywhere, whether it's a supermarket or a Whole Foods or almost anywhere. It's hard to find food that has real rich nutrient dense quality to it. There's more of it, so they can feed more of us, but I think it's like we're in a weird kind of Upton Sinclair, the jungle, esque period, maybe light, because they're not putting sawdust in the sausages, but they're putting sawdust in the fucking shredded cheese. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You know what I mean? They are putting weird shit in the food, weird inedible shit in the food. Where there was a golden era, well, there's been many, I guess, where people are eating whole foods that are unadulterated. That I think is it is harder to find good food, and it's more expensive to find good high quality food.
Yeah, so this food is a good one because I think that it has the appropriate level of nuance where you could
Yeah.
argue it both ways and have a fun conversation.
Yep.
Because this especially, I like how you said that there was the golden time or however you phrase that, where I think that there was this golden time. I don't know exactly when it might have been, but in America, where probably post World War II, when we did
Yeah.
start to have this abundance, but like there wasn't like inedible shit in all your food at the grocery store.
It was a short span of time for sure
Yeah, short
before
span of
TV
time.
dinners
If you
came
go
around.
too far back, all of a sudden,
Yeah.
all you're eating is grain, and maybe the one
Yeah.
time you can slaughter a cow. That's your
Right.
whole diet is like the
Right.
one grain you can farm, and you know what I mean, and maybe a carrot twice a year. And that was for
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of years of human history or whatever. You know, what I mean, hundreds or
Unless you live in the
thousands.
Mediterranean, right? Like unless you live in a place where culturally, you're eating a lot of things that grow off of the land and you're using your livestock to make mostly milks and cheeses and then meat maybe a couple times a year. You know what I mean? Maybe yeah, I mean Native Americans in this country lived a pretty brutal lifestyle, at least in California, where they're eating a lot of fucking acorns.
I think that there
A
were
lot of acorns and
historically,
deer
yeah,
meat.
I think that there were historically only like these, I don't know, 5 to 7 pockets of civilization where they were able to really grow an abundance of food that was diverse. And so this is like Indonesia. A couple of places like this where, on the island of Java is interesting.
Hmm.
It has like some of the most amazing soil in the world to this day. And it's because they have all these volcanoes. That whole island is just populated by this string of volcanoes that makes the soil insanely rich. So they can grow so much there so quickly,
Right.
kind of all year round. That's like rare in human history. I mean,
That's
Mesopotamia
rare.
is another area that did pretty well with all the
Yep.
rivers and everything and the sunshine. But, you know, again, coming into like the modern age, we did have this time where food was relatively inexpensive and you could
Yeah.
get your vegetables that wasn't full of pesticides. And I mean, also meat was cheap and you could really have a great diet at that point. We also
Yeah.
at the same time back then didn't really know too much about food science. And
Right.
so, there was
Which
a
is
lot of
ironic.
information.
Which is
Yeah.
ironic, right? Because, not knowing a lot about food science, but most people are eating whole, unadulterated foods, and then science worms its way into food culture, into food manufacturing, and we find ourselves now being confronted with a grocery store that's full of a lot of petroleum byproducts,
Yeah.
full of a lot of strange filling agents that aren't necessarily nutritionally valuable or, are arguably toxic, and yeah, I find that interesting that we moved into that period where we're like, okay, well, we understand more about what we should and shouldn't put in our bodies now. We also understand more about how to hide, you know industrial byproducts in food,
Mhm.
and how to feed
Yeah.
people things, how to engineer flavors, how to engineer all of these different ways to make people more satisfied with their eating experience and less nutritionally, you know fortified by the food.
There are some things I love about this, some things I hate. So, for example, a thing that I hate is that apparently chicken right now we have a million chickens. It's so easy and fairly cheap to get chicken, right? But
Right.
apparently it has less of the good nutrients, the good protein than it did 20, 30 years ago.
Sure.
But like at the same time, on the other end of this, I do love how there is this wealth of scientific knowledge that goes into the flavor profile of literally anything. And so,
Hmm.
I mean, Malcolm Gladwell has written about why Heinz ketchup is so amazing and why
Right.
everyone uses it. And it's because it went through just like a plethora, like tons and tons and tons of user testing and it's like the perfect formula. You cannot improve upon it. It is fucking perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, and that times, every product on the shelves of the grocery store. I want to get your take on, I think we're in a dark time right now with food because we lost touch with this golden time. We now have the abilities to get really healthy food. You just have to be kind of rich or live in the right community in order to get it. Do you think
Yep.
that we're ever going to do this right so that we do have the knowledge, we do technically have, I don't know, at least in America, the farmland to get really good food. Are we ever going to, like, for the masses, get healthy
I
food,
don't
or is it just
know.
going to get worse and worse and worse so that we all have diabetes and we literally can't help having diabetes?
I don't know, man. It's really rough because as a person that's really focused on where my food comes from and a person that's grown food for myself before, it's pretty bleak in terms of, I mean, I can go and get nutrient dense produce from a farmer's market near me. It's a little more expensive, legitimately, but the food is actually more filling. It's more nutritionally fortifying. I like it. It ends up being weirdly cheaper than going to the grocery store, even though maybe a bunch of carrots is like $3 instead of like $1 for a bag of carrots or something like that. There, it's more satiating. The food is more important to my kind of biome. The difficult part about that is that even though you have this big movement of people moving towards health and exercise, I think Instagram weirdly has been an amazing driver of this. That you see a lot of people getting fit. You know, you see a lot of people getting fit. You see a lot of people focusing more on. There's all these little recipes on TikTok and on Instagram. People want to make these cool recipes for themselves, fucking avocado pancakes or whatever the fuck. And people are gravitating towards this, but the problem is systemic. The problem is that even when you're buying organically grown produce, anytime you're buying any kind of produce that's grown at scale, you're most likely not dealing with a person that has any real grip, or a company that has any real grip on soil science and what's happening in the soil that then lends its nutrients to the food that they're growing. So even the stuff that's organic, the shit that you're getting from Whole Foods, is being grown in soil that's being systematically depleted. And all of the corn and the soy, all the monocrop agriculture that we have that grows the filling agents that end up in our crackers and in all the things that are in Safeway, you know, or at Food for Less, all the packaged foods, all of that stuff is not only devoid of the nutrients that a corn plant or a soybean plant would have if it was grown in regenerative soil, they're also a limited amount of harvests where those plants are even going to be able to grow at all in that soil anymore because it's not being regeneratively taken care of. It's basically, you know, you grow, you harvest, and then you dump a mountain of white powder onto that field. You till that white powder in, and that gives those plants just enough nutrient to make it through another cycle. And the health and the biome of the soil, both nutrient wise, mycelium, all the things that are important to grow good nutrient dense food, that is a niche. It's a niche culture right now. And if we had a moment where, I mean, goddamn, I mean, 10 years ago, the slow food movement was really, people were getting it. You know, Food Inc. There was a bunch of documentaries that were trying to illuminate, you know, the awfulness of factory farming and with animals, and also kind of illuminating how important it is to have regenerative agriculture when it comes to growing vegetables. I don't know that that really took hold as much as I wanted to see it take hold. I don't know that that's a part of the zeitgeist of the public consciousness around food.
See, I think it is just a little bit in the sense that it used to be like grassroots movement and like hippie culture. Now it's kind of just like
Ah, yeah,
general culture. Now it's just kind of
that's
like,
true.
oh,
Mhm.
Whole Foods, you know, and even if Whole Foods
Mhm.
isn't actually
Mhm.
the best place in the world, it's
Mhm.
so normal nowadays.
You're
Whereas it
right.
used to be like, oh, the hippie store. Now it's like, oh,
You're
Whole Foods,
so
owned
right.
by Amazon, you know?
When we were growing up, I mean, funny, the co-op in our town in Sacramento, right? Man, what a watering hole for weirdos, man. Like you go to that place and it's like, you know, it's like the mom that only feeds her kids like almonds. It's the guy that's covered in like sores that has like a full cart of yogurt. You know what I
And
mean?
now I live down the street from it. And now it's the most normal place of all time. It's basically
Yeah.
Safeway without like all the homeless problems.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
otherwise, it's super
Yeah.
normal. Well,
Yeah.
I want to move off of food a little bit. I mean, I
Sure.
guess my radical prediction is just that like I think that 100 years ago the food, you know, the mechanisms to create food in the world were so much different than they are now. 100 years from now, I think that there's going to be a lot of vertical farming happening,
Yep.
a lot of just weird things we can't even predict right now. And I think that technology is going to drive that to some degree. I do also kind of think, I mean, to channel Peter Zion, I think things
Mhm.
are going to be really weird in some parts of the world that they can't like access fertilizer anymore because of certain wars
Yeah.
happening or globalism kind of breaking down in certain areas.
Yep.
Things are going to get really weird, but like we're kind of lucky we live in, I mean, one, California, where there's so much vegetables just grown in our backyard, and then two,
Yep.
America, where we have like the world's, I mean, some of the world's like best farmland, bar none, and just it's
Yeah.
huge, just swaths of land that can be farmed. Anyway, I
Mhm.
don't know. There definitely is a lot to say there, but those are kind of like my radical predictions. uh,
Food's getting better. It got worse. It got
yes,
worse,
yeah,
but it's getting better. I think that's my final word on food, whether it's getting better or worse. Can I just say I need to air this grievance
yeah,
that I'm a contractor, and I want to pivot to tools because
yes,
I just real quick I got to say the way that they're doing the bait and switch with tools now, and I think I've heard this echoed in the podcast, with the woman that was looking for the bra that bought a new bra, like, a year later, same company, same place, and it was shittier quality. I think there's like a real bait and switch going on right now, and I think that a lot of companies have internalized this model where they're like, at least for me, I go to Home Depot and I'll use a specific example. I have a Milwaukee flip knife. It's just a knife that you flip open. It's got a razor blade in it. About 5 years ago, I bought one and I gave one to my mom. I bought two, and she still has hers, and I lost mine, as happens, and I've had to buy a bunch since then. And when I go back to visit her and I hold that original flip knife in my hand, it's one of the nicest tools I've ever bought. It's amazing. It's fully, every part of it is steel or some kind of metal. The case, the mechanisms, it's bulletproof. It's been rusted over and derusted. I mean, this thing is like really, really, really a nice piece of it's a nice tool. And it was only 10, 12 bucks, 15 bucks maybe at the most. Now, when I go to buy that same tool, the entire body is plastic and it's more expensive. And I watched it happen piece by piece with this tool. I watched the metal case get replaced with plastic case. I watched the flipping mechanism get replaced with a plastic one. Now the ones that I have, there's no metal piece besides the clip that goes on my belt. And I see this happen with all of the tools that I buy, where they'll come out with a really nice tool or a really nice case for something, or something that's really, really high build quality for pretty cheap. It's a Coke dealer fucking it's a Coke dealer mentality where they're like, yeah, man, just take a little sniff, you know what I mean? And they get you hooked on their brand and their product. And then they slowly start kind of like, shrinkflating it. They start cutting the quality down and inching the price up until 5 years later. But they try to do it at a rate where you don't notice, where there is no discrete line between like, oh, I went today, or I went a week ago and it was a nice one and now it's a shitty one. It's like piece by piece, they just make it a little cheaper here, a little cheaper there, and then by the time you're 5 years later, you're using a tool that is basically a piece of shit, and it costs you a couple bucks more. And
yeah.
that shit drives me nuts.
I do think that this is a real phenomenon. And I mean, for a little while, I worked at Indiegogo, and I worked with some like entrepreneur folks who like they designed a product and then they had it built over in China. They would actually like go over to the factories in China, and the thing is, you would select the materials that you want, and then these workers would just
Hmm.
put it together. But
Right.
and yeah, I could so see it happening. How you would start out with like 'cause you can choose like which fabric would you like, right?
Right.
And here's 100 different types of fabric that you can choose for the bag you're making or whatever it is. I could imagine that you start out like the first like line of 100 or 500 of these, you do, oh, let's go like, that product,
Let's make
that
them
fabric.
nice.
And then yeah, and then like I could see if they all sell out and you need them quickly and you need just like let's just go that fabric for these. It'd be
Yeah,
so easy to do that, right? It'd be
yeah,
the whole thing is like they're set up. Just be like, let's do that fabric for this line of this product, that sort of thing. And yeah, if you're GE or some company like this, why would like at some level like you're in the business to make money. Like why would you
yeah.
not do that?
I think when companies are producing things at scale, when you're at the point where you're like, okay, let's introduce this product, let's get people into it, and then somebody comes to you and is like, hey, if we replace this all steel body with an ABS plastic body over 5 million units, we're going to save, you know, millions of dollars or however hundreds of thousands of dollars over these 5 million units, and that's going to reduce our bottom line this much. There's people in every company whose job it is to look over those numbers and say, hey, if we just make this little teeny cut to quality, nobody will even notice. It'll still, it'll still basically hold up the same. Then we're going to save this much money on production. That lowers our bottom line, profits go up. And I think that has to be, I mean, I've never sat in like a meeting of that type, but that's got to be something that goes into it. Just the kind of bare capitalist kind of.
I think that we also, again, this just like with food, that there was this golden period that kind of was when we were children, I think, without being nostalgic about it. But you know how like back in the, I don't know, the 50s or whatever, you hear about how a refrigerator cost like a year's salary or something like that, or like
Right,
two people in town had a refrigerator, that sort of a
right.
thing. That was like significantly worse. That was by far, and that refrigerator maybe lasted a long time, but maybe didn't. But like I guarantee it also sucked up a fuck ton of energy, right?
Yeah,
And probably was super inefficient.
yeah,
Nowadays, a refrigerator, like you can just kind of like buy one or get one used for like
yeah,
on Craigslist for almost like next to nothing at the same time. And all products nowadays, they're significantly more energy efficient than they used to be, which is kind of a big
true.
deal. And I do think that like even with the quality going down, let's just say that it is writ large across any sort of product, um, companies can only take that so far before everyone just you know consumer driven economy. People are just going to be like, this company sucks, not this product
Yeah,
but this company, and I'm never shopping
yeah,
here again.
yeah. They
And
make
because of the
shitty stuff.
competition, there's going to be another company that will just maintain some higher quality. They're going to
Right.
get like everybody's business. So we can only degrade our products so far at some level.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And I
yeah,
think you see too that the market is diverging in this way where it's like now I have this mentality of can somebody just make me a flip knife that I pay like $50 for, where a flip knife should cost 15 bucks, 20
yeah,
bucks for it should be a nice one for that much money because it's a simple piece of machinery, just a simple tool. But I'm in this mentality now of like, if somebody makes me a flip knife and I can pay $50 for it and I don't have to buy it again for 10 years, I'll pay this premium price. And you see that in the marketplace, there's a lot of people now doing that. There's a lot of people that have
yeah.
identified that there's this huge gap where companies are reducing the quality of things over time, and they're like, okay, cool, I'm gonna make the badass bulletproof version of this thing. I'm gonna sell it for 3 times as much. It's gonna be a niche. It's gonna be a niche market where people are gonna have to do research to find me. But there's enough people like me who are, I think, probably kind of old school thinkers where I'm like, I just don't want to fucking, or maybe I'm just a dude, I'm just like, I don't want to I don't want to be buying shit all the time. I just want to buy this thing once and have it work for a long ass time.
Yeah, Matt Iglesias talked about that in terms of clothing, where he said like women are more into the fast fashion thing, whereas men
Yeah.
just want a jacket that they can wear forever. And this is interesting to me because every time I go on Facebook and Instagram, which is not that often, but at some point I must have like clicked on some clothing brands on there, like men's clothing brands, like specialized
Hmm.
clothing brands, because that's the only ad that I ever see is like really high quality jackets and really high quality boots and watches and things like this. And they're all like these companies you've never really heard of, but you go on there, you can tell that they care about the product they're making, and it's expensive. It's not cheap. And
You are
like
a bit of
that,
a fancy boy at heart, aren't you,
I
Peter?
never really buy this stuff. I actually did buy a jacket this year from literally from one of these companies that advertised to me. But yeah, I'm like that I'm that demographic where I don't buy much stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But I do love that about the modern age where like I could go to Zara, you know, and get like a $50 jacket that's gonna last for a year and a half, or I could spend $200 on a
Yeah.
jacket that was like brought to my
5-year
little
jacket,
personal
10-year
screen in my
jacket.
when I was in my bedroom that I just click
Right.
yes on, and then it comes to my doorstep 2 days later. That's kind of radical and awesome. That's kind of radical.
Oh, you little slut. You just wanted delivered to you. You just wanted to pop up on your screen, swipe your finger, and it's there for you.
It's not what I want or not. Like it happens and it's convenient. And yes, every
That's
now
what
and then I
that's what
take
sluts
advantage of it.
say.
Yeah.
That's what they always say. I didn't really want it, it just happened.
Well, this is our segue into just the last little piece of this that I did want to cover on this topic, which is
Yeah.
technology. I think that it is kind of inarguable, whether you're talking about like medical science or, like electronics like your iPhone or your sound system that you can get, or your, obviously TVs, like
Hmm.
everything is dramatically better from when I was a kid, which was not
Oh,
that long ago.
crazy better.
Everything, bar nothing.
100%. I mean, just think about speaker technology. You
Yeah.
look at a speaker nowadays that is this big, it's the size of your fist, and it sounds as good as a console system from like the 70s where the speakers weighed 75 pounds and they took
Yeah.
up like 30% of your living room. Absolutely.
The only thing that maybe is a little bit interesting about this is this all this technology in terms of the way we rely on it for friendships and for social media and accessing media at all. Is it kind of bad for us in the sense that like artists don't get paid very much for the music, movie quality is maybe going down even though there's so many movies, like most Netflix movies kind of guaranteed they kind of suck, that sort of a thing. I do think
Yeah.
that like there are a lot of problems there, but I mean, I can't get out of my mind that when in 2007 or 2010 around that area, I read this book about the future of music when you would no longer have to buy a CD or any sort of like you would not buy an album, music just streams and
Right.
you just click on it and it plays. That I was like, oh, this is probably never going to happen,
Yeah.
but that sounds so cool. Imagine if that were the
Yeah.
future. Well, that is the most normal thing in the world now. And
Yeah.
I mean, I
No.
can still appreciate the awesomeness of that because I remember when that wasn't the thing and when that seemed like pie in the sky. But
Yeah.
like young kids today, they won't even like appreciate the radicalness of that because like they had no idea. They have no context for what it used to be like when you like also, do you remember how expensive CDs were? I remember
Dog.
buying like Dr. Dre for $18, just
Oh,
a
yeah.
CD. You know what I mean? And when I was like in high school and $18 was a ton of money to me. I don't,
Dude,
it costs nothing to stream Dr. Dre or anything
I
on
had to save up
Spotify.
my
$5 a
allowance
month or
for
whatever it is.
several weeks to get NSYNC No Strings Attached.
Great
Dude.
example. There you go.
And kids these days, children of this era will never know the existential torment, the absolute depths of depression that you experience when your CD case is stolen, dude. Dude,
That part,
hundreds. I remember, fuck, man. I had a CD case where I was so good. I bought the real CDs with the booklets and like, paid 15, $20 for them every time. Had to have been at least five, six, $700 worth of CDs in that fucking CD case. And somebody would like break into your car or
yep.
break in or like or somebody would steal it from you at school or some shit would happen. Like, damn, dude, like all your music was gone.
Like your soul, right?
Your
Your
soul,
soul.
dude. Your soul.
Also, did you ever have this experience where you'd save up, you'd buy a CD, you're so excited about it, you take it home, and you realize you got the edited version?
Oh, of
Did that
course.
ever happen to you? And you're like, fuck,
Absolutely,
I can't even
dude.
listen to this because they bleep all that, especially if it was a rap album, they bleep every other word. It's like
Oh,
this is literally worse. This is worse than death. Like
dude, they'll never know. They'll never know.
they'll
But
never
yeah,
know.
absolutely. That has been that's something that's getting better. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a shame that artists don't get paid right now and that you have to set yourself as a musician myself. It's challenging. You have to be a lot more creative, and you have to be a lot more dedicated, and it's a lot more challenging of a path to figure out. You have to do a lot more of the thinking on your own to get to where you want to go for it. But if I always think about it this way, if the expense to me is that I have to be 10 times better at what I do, but 100,000 times more people or 1,000 times more people get access to the machinery of creativity, and that's the exchange, is that, you hear artists of every different type, they're like, oh, we're being diluted by low level creators. And I'm like, yeah, dude, but that's a person. That's a person on a journey in their life that is discovering their ability to be creative. And whether or not it's useful to the culture is not really, I mean, that's a really selfish way to look at like a person's arc through life, man. Like, this person is learning how to create something that's going to be valuable to them for the rest of their life. Like, you're going to be all right.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of the huge music that we were force fed throughout our lives, it
Oh, it's
was
so
just the
bad.
person who got lucky with a record
So
deal.
bad, dude.
And
Limp Bizkit, 311, Eminem.
311 was
I mean,
terrible. Yeah.
oh, dude, and
Like beyond
it hits
terrible.
so hard. It hits
Yeah.
so hard. There's so many bands that just smash. They had millions and millions, like multiple platinum records, and like that music would be laughed at today.
Yeah.
People would be, I mean, although all you gotta do is take a trip to the middle of the country to know that that music is still alive and well, my dog.
Very true. Very true.
Nickelback is not a joke anywhere but the coasts.
That is very true. Well, any last words on this topic? I just want to maybe sum up my thoughts, which is that I think that Matt Iglesias is right that our stuff is not getting worse. By and large, across the board, technology is helping us move forward with literally almost everything, with caveats all down the line. And also, you got to be a little bit rich and you got to have a little bit of refined taste in order to not get suckered into eating food that's going to kill you, like quote
Yeah,
unquote food that's going to kill you, buying
yeah.
clothes that aren't going to fall apart in a month and a half, and
Hmm.
I don't know, buying a switch knife or whatever you're talking about that falls apart. I mean, you got to be a little bit discerning. But I think that just part of what it is to be in the modern world is there's junk, but then there's also diamonds, in the thick of it.
Yeah,
Do you have any thoughts?
yeah. My final thought, I think, and I've come to this as we're chatting today, is that the as accessibility increases, overall quality probably decreases,
Yeah,
which is fair, which is a fair trade. That means more people get access to a moderately higher level of thing, even though the highest level of that thing maybe is coming down a little bit. And then, and which I also, that's great. If people are getting more access to cooler stuff and more interesting experiences out of their daily life for a cheaper price, that's cool. Consumerism and environmentalism aside, just conceptually, that's awesome. And
mhm,
then the fact that we live in a capitalist, semi-capitalist system where the market segments itself and diverges at important places on its own, where you can go and you can buy the better thing for more expensive, that's also great. I think the only thing that's challenging about it is education, and that there has to be you have to have some level of education, maybe not traditional education, school education, but you have to educate yourself how to find those things, how to find the things that you need, and how to not be suckered into eating or buying the things that are hurtful to you. We're still in a little bit of a people are still figuring that out, but people are smart as fuck. People are going to figure that out.
yeah, totally.
So I think I agree with you, and I think we're just in a little bit of a weird contact zone right now where we're moving into a time where people probably will by and large be more educated, be making better consumer decisions, be making better consumer decisions with their information, all of that stuff
Maybe
is
I'm
gonna.
skeptical about the information part, but yeah,
All right.
or I'm worried about that. Let's just say, but yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. Hey, well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Thanks for joining, Devin, and until next time.